That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the parade ground where the 82nd Airborne Division's K9 unit assembled for morning muster. The air carried the sharp tang of dew on grass and the faint metallic scent of oiled rifles stacked nearby. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention in her camouflage utilities, her boots planted firmly in the red clay soil. At her side, Rex, her German Shepherd partner, sat rigid, his black and tan coat gleaming under the first light, ears perked toward the barked commands echoing from the formation. "Unit, report!" Captain Harlan's voice cut through the crisp air like a blade. He paced the front line, his polished boots clicking against the ground, eyes scanning the handlers and their dogs with the precision of a man who'd logged 20 years in special operations support. The K9 teams were the unseen sentinels of the base, detecting explosives, narcotics, even the subtle stress of a soldier on the edge. Loyalty here wasn't spoken, it was forged in silence, in the steady rhythm of heel to paw during endless patrols. Eleanor had joined the unit 3 years prior, one of the few women in a role still whispered about in the barracks as handler's ground. At 32, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd traded a civilian life for this. Boots laced tight, dog tags tucked under her collar, her dark hair pulled into a regulation bun. Rex had been her match from day one, rescued from a shelter, trained through the grueling certification at Lackland, bonded in the humid nights of joint exercises. He sensed her moods before she did, the slight tension in her shoulders after a long shift, the way her pulse quickened during a false alarm drill. In return, she was his world, the hand that fed him, the voice that commanded "sits," the presence that kept the chaos at bay. The routine unfolded like clockwork. Handlers called out their dogs' statuses, clear, alert, ready, while the animals held their positions, tails still, eyes forward. Captain Harlan nodded approval, his clipboard in hand, noting compliance for the daily log. This was the chain of command in motion. Orders from above, execution below, no room for deviation. Elena's report came crisp and low. "Sergeant Vasquez and Rex, all systems green, sir." Rex didn't flinch as Harlan approached, his gaze locking on the captain's boots in perfect discipline. But then, as the unit broke for the tracking exercise, a ripple disturbed the order. Private Dawson, a lanky 19-year-old from the rear ranks, lingered too long near the kennel truck. He was new to base support, assigned to logistics, but always eyeing the K9 teams with a mix of awe and resentment. Whispers had circulated about him, trouble back home, a disciplinary mark from basic for mouthing off to a drill instructor. Today, he crouched by Rex's crate during the water break, his hand darting out too fast, too familiar. "Hey, boy, easy," Dawson muttered, fingers grazing Rex's muzzle without permission. Rex stiffened, a low rumble building in his throat, not aggression, but warning. Eleanor was across the field, filling canteens when she heard it. She dropped the hose and crossed the ground in measured strides, her voice steady but firm. "Private, step back. That's not your call." Dawson straightened, smirking as if it were a joke. "Just petting the mutt, Sergeant. What's the harm? He's not going to bite his own side, right?" A few handlers nearby paused, exchanging glances, but no one intervened. The chain demanded respect for rank, but Dawson's tone carried the edge of someone testing boundaries, the kind that festered in quiet moments. Elena met his eyes, her posture unchanging. "Protocol, Private. Dogs respond to their handlers only. You want to work with them? Earn the slot." Rex pressed against her leg now, his warmth a steady anchor amid the rising tension. Harlan was watching from afar, arms crossed, But he didn't call it out. Not yet. This was the unspoken test of the unit. Maintain order without escalation. Prove your place through restraint. The exercise resumed, but the air felt heavier, charged like the static before a storm. Trackers deployed, dogs leading handlers through simulated breach points in the mock village setup, plywood huts scarred from years of drills, the distant thump of a Black Hawk warming up on the helipad. Eleanor and Rex moved as one, his nose to the ground, picking up the scent trail of hidden contraband buried in the dirt. She praised him softly after each find. "Gut, Rex," her gloved hand brushing his flank. But Dawson's shadow lingered in her mind, a disruption in the rhythm. By midday, as the unit debriefed under the canvas awning of the training pavilion, the violation sharpened. Harlan reviewed the logs, praising the top performers, when Dawson piped up from the back row. "Sir, if we're talking efficiency, why waste time on these animals? Drones do the same job faster. No feeding, no walks." Laughter rippled from a few support staffers, but the handlers went still. Elena felt Rex's ears twitch beside her, mirroring her own unease. Harlan's jaw tightened, but he kept it procedural. "Input noted, Private. K9 integration is doctrine. Dismissed." As the group dispersed, Eleanor lingered, clipping Rex's leash for the return to quarters. Dawson brushed past her, close enough that his shoulder clipped hers. "Lighten up, Sergeant. It's just a dog." She didn't respond, but inside, the moral fault line cracked. Duty bound her to report the insubordination, to uphold the unit's code, where loyalty to partner was as sacred as to country. Yet compassion tugged. Dawson was young, raw, perhaps carrying burdens no one saw. Reporting him could end his path here, ripple through his record like a demotion, obey the chain or sense the deeper fracture. That evening, as the base settled into twilight, the hum of generators and distant reveille fading, Eleanor sat on her bunk in the handler's barracks. Rex curled at her feet, his head on her boot, breathing steady. The decision loomed, quiet as the desert wind slipping through the screen door. Tomorrow's memorial service at the base chapel for a fallen handler from last deployment would bring the community together, ranks and families in pews, honoring bonds unbroken. But for Elena, the real test was already underway, hidden in the silence between orders. The chapel bells tolled at precisely 0800, their low chime cutting through the morning mist that clung to Fort Bragg's oak-lined paths. Rows of uniformed figures converged on the small stone building, boots scuffing the gravel in measured cadence, the air thick with the scent of polished leather and fresh-pressed wool. Families mingled at the edges, wives in modest dresses, children clutching small flags, while the K9 handlers arrived in formation, leashes taut, dogs heeling silently at their sides. This was the base's way of honoring the fallen, not with fanfare, but with the quiet precision of a unit standing watch. Elena Vasquez entered last among the handlers, Rex's nails clicking softly on the concrete steps as they ascended. She chose a pew at the rear, away from the front, where Captain Harlan and the senior officers sat, their backs straight as rifle barrels. Rex settled at her feet, his body heat warming the cold floorboards, his dark eyes scanning the room with the instinctive vigilance that had saved lives in training simulations. Elena's uniform felt heavier today, the weight of her sergeant's stripes pressing against her shoulders. The night before, she'd replayed Dawson's words in her mind. "It's just a dog," each loop eroding the restraint she'd built over years of service. Reporting him now, on the eve of this memorial, risked turning a personal slight into a public fracture. But silence? That invited more tests, more cracks in the chain. The chaplain took the podium, his voice steady over the microphone, reciting the service for Staff Sergeant Ramirez, lost to an IED in Afghanistan 2 months prior. "He served with unwavering loyalty," the chaplain intoned, "to his country, his unit, and the partner who never left his side. A photo of Ramirez projected on the wall behind, him kneeling beside his Belgian Malinois, both in full gear, dust caking their fur after a patrol. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the congregation, heads nodding in shared grief. Elena's hand rested lightly on Rex's head, feeling the subtle rise and fall of his breathing. Ramirez had been her mentor in the unit, the one who'd taught her to read a dog's subtle cues, the flick of an ear for hidden threats, the press of a flank for unspoken comfort. His absence left a void, one that duty demanded she fill without falter. As the service progressed, hymns filled the space, voices blending in disciplined harmony. Elena kept her gaze forward, but her peripheral caught movement in the side aisle. Private Dawson slouched in a row near the middle, his logistics patch stark against the sea of K9 insignia. He wasn't assigned to this unit's honors detail, but protocol allowed base-wide attendance for morale. His eyes darted toward the handlers section, lingering on Rex with that same smirk from yesterday. When the chaplain called for a moment of silence, Dawson shifted, his boot tapping an irregular rhythm against the pew, drawing a few glances. Elena tensed, Rex mirroring her with a soft huff of breath, but she held position. Obedience first. Disrupt nothing in this sacred order. The silence broke with the chaplain's prayer, words echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Grant us the strength to uphold the bonds that define us. As the congregation rose for the final commendation, a young voice pierced the hush from the front rows. A teenager no older than 16 stood awkwardly in civilian clothes. A boy with Ramirez's sharp features, his hands clasped tight. "Dad always said the dogs were guardians," he said, voice cracking but clear. "They see what we can't." The words hung, unintended as testimony, drawing nods from the handlers. Elena's chest tightened. She'd met the boy once at a unit barbecue when Ramirez had introduced him with pride. Now, the kid's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on her before dropping. After the service, the crowd filtered out into the sunlight, families clustering for quiet conversations while officers exchanged salutes. Elena lingered in the vestibule, clipping Rex's leash for the walk back to quarters. The dog pressed close, sensing the unresolved knot in her posture. Harlan passed by, pausing to nod. "Solid turnout, Sergeant. Ramirez would approve." His tone was procedural, but his glance held a question. Had she logged the incident with Dawson? She murmured affirmation, but the words felt hollow. Duty pressed. File the report through channels. Let the chain sort the insubordination. Yet morality whispered of the boy's isolation. Dawson's youth mirroring the vulnerability Ramirez's son now carried. Outside, the group dispersed toward the parade ground, where a small reception waited. Coffee urns steaming under tents, folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Elena guided Rex to the edge, away from the clusters, but Dawson approached again, this time with a paper cup in hand. "Didn't see you up front, Sergeant," he said, voice low but edged. "Afraid your pup would steal the show." A couple of logistics privates nearby chuckled, but their eyes flicked away, unwilling to engage. Rex's ears flattened slightly, his body tensing against her leg, a silent alert to the rising discord. "Private," Elena replied evenly, her voice pitched for command without volume. "This isn't the place. Focus on the reason we're here." She turned to leave, but Dawson stepped closer, his cup sloshing. "Reason? Honoring a guy who died chasing shadows with a mutt? Come on, it's 2023. We got tech for that." The words landed like a misfired round, drawing stares from passing handlers. One, Corporal Reyes, with his Labrador, paused mid-stride but held back. Chain of command meant letting superiors handle it. Harlan's voice cut in from across the tent. "Dawson, report to Logistics HQ, now!" The captain's face was stone, clipboard exchanged for folded arms. Dawson shrugged but complied, his retreat marked by the crunch of gravel under his boots. The air settled, handlers resuming conversations in lowered tones, but the violation echoed. Elena felt the weight of witnesses, the quiet nods from her peers, the unspoken approval in Rex's steady gaze. Reporting him wasn't just protocol now, it was protection for the unit's core, the loyalty that Ramirez had embodied. As the reception wound down, the sun climbing higher, Elena walked Rex back through the base paths, the dog's pace matching her own deliberate steps. Families headed to vehicles. The teenager from the service climbing into a sedan with his mother, his face pressed to the window. She wondered about Dawson's own fractures, rumors of a rough enlistment, a family back home fraying at the edges. Compassion urged a word, a chance to redirect, but duty clarified the line. Insubordination undermined the very guardians the boy had spoken of. By afternoon, in the handler's ready room, Elena drafted the incident report on her tablet. Facts only, no emotion. Unauthorized contact, disrespectful commentary during muster and memorial. She hit submit, the screen's confirmation beep as final as a chambered round. That evening, as barracks lights flickered on against the deepening dusk, Rex curled on his mat in the corner of her quarters. The base hummed with routine, mess hall chatter, distant truck engines, but Eleanor sat at her desk, the report's ripple already stirring. Harlan would review it at morning brief, the chain engaging like gears in a well-oiled mechanism. Yet in the quiet, she sensed the test deepening, not just Dawson's defiance, but the moral cost of enforcing order in a world where loyalty extended beyond commands, to the unseen bonds holding them all. Tomorrow's training would demand focus, but the fracture lingered, waiting for its next reveal. The morning brief in the K-9 unit's operations tent unfolded under the relentless North Carolina sun, its canvas walls rippling faintly in the breeze that carried the earthy scent of pine from the surrounding woods. Captain Harlan stood at the head of the folding table, his voice clipped and precise as he reviewed the overnight logs, patrol rotations, kennel maintenance, a minor alert from the perimeter fence. Handlers sat in straight-back chairs, notebooks open, dogs stationed at their feet in perfect heel. Elena Vasquez kept her expression neutral, Rex's flank warm against her knee, his steady breathing a counterpoint to the knot tightening in her chest. The report she'd filed the night before sat in the digital queue, its submission a quiet act of duty, but now it loomed like an unchambered round, waiting for the captain's review. Incidents from yesterday? Harlan continued, tapping his tablet with a gloved finger. The room stilled, the only sound the soft click of Rex's nails as he shifted imperceptibly. Sergeant Vasquez, your log on Private Dawson. Walk us through it. Heads turned subtly, eyes flicking toward her without judgment. Protocol demanded transparency, but the undercurrent of support hummed in the air, forged from shared patrols and late-night watches. Elena rose smoothly, her boots scraping the packed dirt floor. Sir, 2 instances. Unauthorized contact with Rex during the water break post-muster and disrespectful commentary during the Ramirez Memorial reception. Private questioned the value of K-9 integration, sir. I de-escalated on site, but the pattern warrants documentation. Her words were factual, stripped of inflection, each one measured like a step in formation. Rex lifted his head briefly, eyes locking on hers in silent affirmation, his loyalty an unspoken shield against the exposure. Harlan nodded, his face impassive as he scrolled the attached details, timestamps, witness notes from Corporal Reyes. Understood. Logistics will be notified for a formal review. Unit integrity starts here. No tolerance for undermining doctrine. He paused, gaze sweeping the room. Handlers, your partners are assets, not debate topics. Dismissed to range prep. The group stood in unison, chairs folding with a chorus of metallic snaps, but the tension lingered like humidity after rain. As they filed out, Reyes caught Eleanor's eye, murmuring low, "Right call, Sarge. Keeps the line clean." She acknowledged with a nod, clipping Rex's lead, but inside the moral scales tipped heavier. Reporting Dawson protected the unit, yet it thrust a young soldier into the grinder of command scrutiny, where one mark could derail a career. The range training commenced at 1,000 hours sharp, the mock urban site alive with the crackle of simulated gunfire from pop-up targets and the low whir of drones overhead for aerial overwatch. Handlers deployed in pairs, dogs leading through debris-strewn alleys of shipping containers and chain-link barriers, scents layered to mimic real-world threats, explosive residue, narcotics, the faint chemical trace of stress sweat. Elena and Rex took point on the central lane, his nose working the ground in tight zigzags, black nostrils flaring at the buried device under a pile of faux rubble. "Such, Rex," she commanded softly, her voice threading through the wind that tugged at her cap. He sat alert, paw extended, and she marked the find with a gloved hand signal. The team's radio acknowledging with static-laced confirmation, Vasquez team, clear on Sector 3. But midway through the rotation, disruption arrived in the form of a logistics runner, Private Ellis, Dawson's squad mate, jogging up with a sealed envelope from HQ. "Sergeant, for you, from the captain." Elena accepted it mid-patrol, Rex holding sit without prompt, his ears attuned to the intruder's approach. Inside was a directive, preliminary inquiry scheduled for 1400, her presence required as reporting party. The paper crinkled in her grip, the ink stark against the yellowed form, standard procedure, but it amplified the fracture. Duty had engaged the chain, now conscience questioned the velocity. Dawson's youth echoed Ramirez's son, that raw edge of loss and search for anchors. Was enforcement justice, or just another order blind to the human beneath the uniform? Afternoon brought the inquiry to the base provost office, a squat brick building off the main drag, its fluorescent lights buzzing over scuffed linoleum. Elena reported at 13:55. Rex leashed to the outer post with water bowl provided. Protocol for working dogs in administrative spaces. Inside, Lieutenant Morse, a wiry JAG officer with wire-rimmed glasses, waited behind a metal desk stacked with files. Harlan sat to his right, notebook at hand. "Sergeant Vasquez, state your account," Morse began, recorder whirring to life. The room's air conditioner humming a monotonous drone. She recounted the events methodically, the crouch by the crate, the smirk during debrief, the taunt at the reception. "Private's actions disrupted unit cohesion, sir. Disrespect to K9 role extends to the handlers who rely on that bond." Morse jotted notes, his pen scratching like dry leaves. Harlan interjected sparingly, confirming witnesses, but his glance toward Eleanor held a layer of appraisal. Had she escalated prematurely, or held the line with precision? The session stretched, questions probing for bias. "Any prior interactions with Dawson?" "None," she replied. "Emotional state during memorial?" "Focused on duty, sir." As it wrapped, Morse leaned back. "Appreciate the clarity, Sergeant. Private Dawson will be interviewed next. This stays internal unless patterns emerge." Elena saluted and exited, the door clicking shut behind her like a latch on a kennel gate. Outside, Rex rose to greet her, nose bumping her hand in routine reassurance. The base bustled around them, trucks rumbling past, a formation drilling in the distance, but the reckoning felt public now, ripples spreading through channels she'd activated. Compassion gnawed. Dawson might face reprimand, extra duty, or worse, a transfer that severed his shot at redemption. Yet morality clarified, the unit's trust, the Guardians Ramirez's son had named, demanded defense. Word filtered back by evening chow, whispers in the mess hall line where steam rose from trays of MRE-inspired fare, beef stew, rice, the faint tang of institutional coffee. Reyes slid in beside her at the table. "Heard Dawson's got a sit-down tomorrow. Kid's mouthy, but you did right." Elena nodded, fork pausing over her plate, Rex waiting patiently under the bench, the moral tension coiled tighter. Obedience to report had upheld order, but the cost lingered in the quiet. What if Dawson's defiance masked deeper fractures, like the isolation she'd glimpsed in the teenager at church? Later, as twilight settled over the barracks, Elena walked Rex along the perimeter trail, fireflies flickering in the underbrush, the distant call of a night bird piercing the dusk. The dog's pace was steady, his shoulder brushing hers, sensing the unresolved weight. She'd chosen conscience over silence, but the test evolved. Now, in the chain's response, would justice temper duty or grind it to procedure? Harlan's review loomed for morning, the unit's eyes on her as the symbol of restraint. In the deepening shadows, loyalty felt both anchor and burden, binding her to the path ahead. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The first light of dawn filtered through the narrow windows of the K9 unit's briefing room, casting elongated shadows across the tactical maps pinned to the walls. Captain Harlan arrived early, as always, his coffee steaming in a matte black mug, the aroma mingling with the faint mustiness of canvas and aged paper. Handlers filtered in quietly, boots thudding softly on the concrete floor. Dogs settling into their designated spots with leashes coiled neatly beside them. Elena Vasquez took her seat near the front, Rex at her feet, his coat still carrying the chill from their pre-dawn perimeter walk. The report's aftermath hung in the air like unspoken radio static. Dawson's interview, scheduled for 0900, the chain of command now fully engaged. Procedural gears turning with inexorable precision. Harlan cleared his throat, calling the room to order with a sharp rap of his knuckles on the table. Morning brief. Overnight clear. No alerts. Focus today. Joint exercise with EOD. Scent discrimination. Under simulated low-vis conditions. His eyes scanned the group, lingering a beat on Elena. Administrative note. Private Dawson's matter is under review. No speculation. Stick to mission. Nods rippled through the handlers, faces set in disciplined masks, but the undercurrent pulsed. Loyalty to the unit meant trusting the process, even as it tested individual resolve. Elena felt Rex's subtle shift, his shoulder pressing against her calf, a silent anchor amid the weight of her role in the unfolding scrutiny. The exercise kicked off at 0700 on the edge of the training grounds, where fog clung to the low-lying brush like a shroud, muffling the distant rumble of Humvees. Teams paired off, dogs harnessed with GPS collars, handlers in subdued gear navigating the mock debris field. Twisted rebar, sandbags stacked into barricades, the acrid scent of buried simulants wafting faintly on the breeze. Elena and Corporal Reyes took the eastern flank, Rex leading with nose to ground, his movements fluid and deliberate. "Find it," she murmured, her voice low against the wind that rustled the pine needles overhead. He quartered the area methodically, pausing at a cluster of faux wreckage, sitting sharp on the explosive trace. Reyes marked it on his tablet, radio crackling. "Control, positive on grid 47, Vasquez team." Midway through, a runner from Provost interrupted, Ellis again, envelope in hand. "Sergeant, update from Lieutenant Morse." Eleanor stepped aside, Rex holding alert without command as she scanned the directive. Dawson had denied intent, claimed misunderstanding, but witnesses corroborated her account. Full inquiry set for 1300, with unit reps present. The paper folded neatly into her pocket, but the moral tension coiled tighter. Justice demanded accountability, yet compassion glimpsed the private's isolation. A young soldier adrift in the ranks, much like Ramirez's son navigating grief without a father's steady hand. By noon, as the unit broke for hydration under the camouflage canopy, word spread through subtle channels. Dawson confined to quarters pending review, logistics shorter body for the afternoon shift. Handlers exchanged glances over water bottles, the clink of dog tags the only punctuation in the brief silence. Reyes leaned in. Kids got a record from basic, insubordination, but no priors here. Your report might stick, Sarge. Elena nodded, pouring from the cooler. The icy stream splashing into Rex's bowl. Duty had fortified the line, but the cost echoed. One act of defiance could cascade, marking not just Dawson, but the unit's tolerance for fractures. The inquiry reconvened in the provost office, its walls lined with faded posters on ethics and chain of command, the air conditioner droning steadily against the midday heat seeping through the blinds. Lieutenant Morse presided, Harlan at his side, while Elena and Reyes sat as witnesses on metal chairs that creaked under their weight. Dawson entered at 12:55, uniform pressed but posture slumped, eyes downcast as he saluted. "Private First Class Dawson reporting, sir." Morse motioned him to the facing chair, recorder spinning up with a mechanical whir. "Private, address the allegations. Unauthorized contact with military working dog, disruptive commentary during unit debrief and memorial event." Morse's tone was even, pen poised over his notepad. Dawson shifted, glancing briefly at Elena before fixing on the lieutenant. "Sir, the dog thing was curiosity, not malice. Handlers are always around 'em. And the comments? Just venting frustration, sir. Logistics gets the scraps. K9 gets the glory, no disrespect intended." His voice held an edge, defensive but restrained, the words landing like half-loaded rounds, enough to probe, not explode. Harlan interjected, voice level. "Doctrine isn't optional, Private. Undermining K9 roles erodes cohesion. Witnesses confirm tone and context." Reyes added his account crisply, the smirk at muster, the taunt post-reception. Elena followed, her testimony factual. "Actions questioned the bond central to our operations, sir. Pattern suggests need for corrective training." Rex waited outside, leashed to the post, his soft whines audible through the door during lulls. A reminder of the stakes, loyalty distilled to instinct. Morse probed deeper, questions slicing into Dawson's background. Family strains, adjustment to base life, any unresolved issues from enlistment. The private admitted to rough patches back home, a father's illness, enlistment as escape, but deflected on intent. "I respect the unit, sir. It's hard watching from the sidelines." The session stretched to 14:30, the room growing stuffy, sweat beading on brows. As it concluded, Morse dismissed them. "Findings to command by 1600. Private, stand by for orders." Dawson saluted out, his footsteps echoing down the hall, heavier now with the weight of exposure. Outside, Elena retrieved Rex, his tail giving a single wag as she scratched behind his ears, the simple ritual grounding her amid the procedural storm. Harlan pulled her aside near the parking lot, gravel crunching under their boots. "Solid handling, Sergeant. This could lead to reassignment, but it's clean, protects the program." His nod carried approval, but Elena sensed the ripple. Her integrity had elevated the conflict, drawing eyes from higher chains, where one handler's stand could spotlight systemic gaps in integration training. Afternoon training resumed, subdued, the fog lifting to reveal a sky heavy with clouds, thunder rumbling distant like artillery. Elena and Rex ran a final scent line, his focus unwavering, but her mind traced the moral path ahead. Reporting had upheld duty, yet Dawson's admissions stirred compassion. A soldier fraying at edges, echoing the vulnerability she'd seen in Ramirez's son at the memorial. Would justice reform him, or merely punish? As the unit debriefed under the pavilion, radios hissing end-of-day reports, a base-wide memo pinged on tablets, all hands assembly tomorrow at the chapel, announced as morale and reflection, post-inquiry. The public reckoning loomed, witnesses gathering, the fracture no longer private. Evening fell with a light drizzle pattering on the barracks roof, the scent of wet earth rising through the open window. Elena sat on her bunk, Rex's head in her lap, his breathing steady as she reviewed the day's logs. The teenager's words from the service replayed, "Guardians," a quiet call to the bonds that duty defended. Harlan's impending recommendation could spark unit-wide protocol tweaks, mentorship for support roles like Dawson's, but in the dim light, conscience weighed the cost. Integrity's price was scrutiny, for her and the private alike. Tomorrow's assembly would test it further, the chain's response forging legacy from tension. Rex sighed, eyes closing, his trust absolute, a mirror to the path she walked, step by measured step. The chapel's wooden doors creaked open at 8:30, admitting a steady stream of personnel into the cool, shadowed interior, where sunlight slanted through stained-glass windows, painting fractured colors on the pews. The all-hands assembly had been called with terse efficiency, no details in the memo, just coordinates and uniform specs. Service dress, no sidearms, partners leashed outside. Elena Vasquez arrived with the handler's contingent, Rex secured to the hitching post by the steps, his nose twitching at the faint incense lingering from yesterday's services. She smoothed her jacket's creases, the brass on her collar catching the light, and took her place in the mid-rows among the K9 team, the scent of floor polish and aged hymnals grounding her amid the gathering tension. Captain Harlan entered with the officers, his stride measured, followed by Lieutenant Morse and a cluster of logistics brass. The pews filled methodically, infantry from the 82nd in pressed greens, support staff in subdued blues, families relegated to the overflow in the vestibule. Whispers hushed as Harlan mounted the low platform, the microphone feedback a brief squeal before his voice steadied the room. This assembly addresses unit cohesion following recent administrative matters. No fanfare, focus on doctrine, accountability, and the bonds that sustain us. His gaze swept the congregation, pausing on Elena and the handlers before settling on the logistics section, where Dawson sat rigid in the third row, flanked by his squad leader, eyes fixed on the floorboards. Morse stepped forward, tablet in hand, the screen's glow illuminating his notes under the dimmed lights. Private Dawson's inquiry concluded this morning. Findings: confirmed insubordination through unauthorized interaction and disruptive statements undermining K9 operations. Effective immediately, reassignment to Fort Sill for retraining, entry-level protocols, no privileges. Murmurs stirred like wind through pines, but Harlan's raised hand quelled them. Dawson's shoulders sagged imperceptibly, his face paling against the khaki collar, the weight of the announcement landing with the finality of a locked kennel. Elena felt the ripple. Justice served through channels, her report the catalyst, but compassion twisted in her gut, glimpsing the private's isolation. A young enlistee now marked for relocation, his path rerouted by one handler's stand. Harlan continued, voice even. This isn't punishment for its own sake. It's correction to reinforce the chain. K9 integration isn't optional. It's the edge that keeps us sharp. Handlers, your vigilance upholds that. Support roles, your input strengthens it. He nodded toward Elena. Sergeant Vasquez's documentation set the standard. Facts over friction. Heads turned subtly, nods from Reyes and the team, a quiet affirmation. But the public exposure burned. Her integrity now spotlighted, the moral cost laid bare under watchful eyes. Rex whined softly from outside, audible through the cracked window, his instinct bridging the divide she'd enforced. As the assembly shifted to reflection, the chaplain rose, his robes whispering against the podium. In moments like these, we honor the guardians, human and canine, who see beyond orders. He gestured to the projected photo of Ramirez, the fallen handler's image steady against the wall. The room fell silent, breaths sinking in the hush, until a voice broke from the front. The teenager, Ramirez's son, standing unbidden in his civilian shirt, hands clenched at his sides. He'd slipped in with the families. His mother beside him, eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "My dad. He talked about Sergeant Vasquez," the boy said, voice steadying as all eyes turned. "Said she was tough but fair. Taught him to trust the bond, like with his dog. After he was gone, she sent letters about patrols we couldn't know. She's been my guardian, even from here." The words hung raw and unscripted. Drawing a collective inhale, Elena's pulse quickened, her hand tightening on the pew's edge, the subtle gesture unseen but felt in Rex's distant alert outside. She'd written those notes months ago, brief updates on unit traditions, Ramirez's favorite drills, compassion overriding protocol in private moments, a thread of loyalty extended beyond the grave. The boy's gaze found her in the mid-rows, holding steady, a salute in silence that pierced the formal air. Harlan's expression softened fractionally, Morse jotting a note, but the revelation rippled outward, witnesses absorbing the human layer beneath the procedure. The assembly concluded with a brief prayer, voices murmuring in unison, the chaplain's words on strength and unseen ties echoing off the rafters. As the crowd dispersed into the morning light, families clustering on the lawn, while officers conferred in low tones, Elena moved toward the vestibule. Dawson passed close, his path crossing hers near the doors, eyes meeting briefly, no words exchanged, but a nod from him, grudging yet real, acknowledgement of the line drawn. Logistics HQ would process his out-processing by week's end, the reassignment a chance for recalibration, her report the pivot that spared escalation to court-martial. Outside, Rex rose to greet her, muzzle bumping her knee in routine warmth, his wet nose grounding the swirl of exposure. The teenager approached hesitantly, his mother trailing, the grass damp under their shoes. "Sergeant," he said, extending a hand, small, calloused from civilian life. "Thanks for everything." Elena clasped it firmly, her grip steady, words measured. "Your father set the example, son. We carry it forward." He smiled faintly, the title Guardian unspoken now, but etched in the moment, a legacy blooming from her quiet acts. Harlan intercepted her en route to the handler's tent, clipboard exchanged for a radio clipped to his belt. "That was unforeseen," he said, voice low against the chatter of dispersing personnel. "Boys' words. They underscore why we hold the line. Commands reviewing integration protocols, cross-training for support roles, mandatory sensitivity briefs. Your input sparked it." The reform glinted like sunlight on brass, institutional ripples from one moral stand. But Eleanor nodded without triumph. The cost lingering in Dawson's distant figure, boarding a shuttle, and the teenagers retreating back toward the parking lot. Afternoon brought the unit to the kennels, the air thick with the scent of hay and disinfectant, dogs settling into runs after the morning's strain. Elena brushed Rex's coat methodically, his tail thumping softly against the concrete, the ritual a balm for the day's scrutiny. Public reckoning had passed, witnesses convinced chain intact, but the transformation stirred deeper. Her defiance of silence not just protected partners, but wove compassion into duty, mentoring across ranks and losses. As the sun dipped, casting golden hues through the chain-link fence, she sensed the shift. Loyalty no longer solitary, but a web binding the fractured to wholeness, one measured step at a time. The days following the assembly blurred into a rhythm of enforced normalcy, the base's pulse steadying like a rifle settling after recoil. Fort Bragg's training fields hummed with the usual cadence, boots pounding packed earth during PT runs, the sharp bark of commands echoing off the pine stands, the low whine of generators feeding the kennels through the humid afternoons. Elena Vasquez moved through it all with measured precision, her patrols with Rex extending longer now, as if the dog's unerring focus could map the unseen shifts in her own path. The provost's findings had circulated via memo, Dawson's reassignment approved, out processing set for 0800 Friday, with a notation for remedial leadership training at SIL. No appeals, no drama, just the chain's quiet efficiency, grinding forward without flourish. In the handler's ready room that Monday, Captain Harlan gathered the unit for an extended brief, the air thick with the scent of fresh-printed handouts and the faint earthy tang from Rex's paws after their morning track. Folding chairs scraped as the team settled, dogs stationed in a neat semicircle, tails still, eyes alert to their partner's cues. Harlan unrolled a laminated chart on the table, cross-training protocols sketched in block letters, joint sessions for logistics and K9, mandatory modules on asset integration. Command's green-lit expansions, he said, pointer tapping the grid. Sergeant Vasquez, your documentation highlighted gaps. You'll lead the first pilot, 2 hours weekly, starting next rotation. Focus, respect for roles, no silos. Eleanor nodded, her posture unchanging, but the weight settled deeper. The reform she'd sparked now pinned to her stripes, a legacy etched in schedules and sign-offs. Rex pressed his flank against her boot, a subtle warmth amid the cool concrete. His loyalty, the unspoken core Harlan's words circled. Whispers from the rear rows carried approval, Reyes murmuring to his Labrador's handler about finally bridging the divide. But Elena's mind traced the human cost. Dawson's shuttle left in days. Her stand had rerouted him, but would it mend or merely displace the fracture? The pilot session convened midweek under a canvas shelter on the auxiliary range, the sun beating down in relentless waves, turning the metal poles hot to the touch. Logistics volunteers filed in, 8 privates in sweat-dampened utilities, clipboards in hand, joined by a handful of K9 pairs, leashes coiled like readiness coils. Elena stood at the front, Rex at heel, his black nose quivering at the unfamiliar mix of scents, motor oil from the support gear, the synthetic bite of training aids. Objective. Understand the bond, she began, voice projecting clear over the wind that tugged at the awning's edges. Dogs aren't tools, they're extensions. Watch. She deployed Rex on a basic alert drill, hiding a narcotic simulant in a mock supply crate. He quartered the ground methodically, ears flicking at distractions, sitting sharp on the find. The privates leaned in, notebooks scribbling, one muttering, "Damn, that's instinct we can't code." As the group rotated to hands-on, proper approach protocols, no-touch boundaries, Elena circulated, correcting grips on leashes, explaining the subtle cues, a dog's ear tilt for unease, the press of a shoulder for trust. One Private Ellis from Dawson's squad hesitated near Rex, hand hovering. "He won't snap." Eleanor shook her head. "Not if you respect the line, like any partner." The session stretched to 1100, sweat beading on brows, but the air lightened, questions flowing procedural, barriers eroding in the shared rhythm of commands and praises. Harlan observed from the perimeter, arms crossed, his nod at debrief a quiet endorsement. "Builds cohesion," he said later over lukewarm coffee in the ops tent. "Your input's driving it, Sergeant." Higher-ups noted the Ramirez tie-in, morale boost across divisions. That evening, as the base settled into twilight, the hum of cicadas rising from the underbrush, Elena walked Rex along the chapel path. The stone building's silhouette softened by dusk, gravel crunched under her boots, the dog's nails a steady counterpoint, his pace sinking to her contemplative stride. The teenager's words from the assembly replayed, "She's been my guardian," a revelation that had rippled beyond the pews, prompting a command inquiry into handler family support protocols. Letters like hers, quiet extensions of duty, now formalized as optional outreach, her example the template. Compassion had threaded through obedience, transforming private acts into institutional threads. But the moral tension lingered. Had she overstepped then, as with Dawson now? A figure approached from the parking lot shadows. Dawson, duffel slung over his shoulder. Uniform traded for travel civvies, his posture straighter than in the inquiry room. He paused at a respectful distance, eyes on Rex first, then her. "Sergeant," he said, voice low against the fading light. "Heard about the training. Figured I'd say. Thanks, in a way, for not letting it slide." No smirk now, just the raw edge of a soldier recalibrating. The reassignment a reset rather than ruin. Elena met his gaze evenly. "Duty's the line, Private. Cross-train hard at SIL. Earn your slot back." He nodded, a salute half-formed before he turned toward the idling transport, the engine's rumble swallowing his footsteps. Rex watched him go, ears perked, then leaned into her leg, a silent affirmation that the fracture, enforced, could heal. Friday brought the unit to the helipad for a routine air insertion drill, rotors thumping overhead as Blackhawks settled dust clouds across the tarmac, the metallic tang of aviation fuel sharp in the air. Elena and Rex boarded second, harnesses clipping secure, the dog's body steady against the vibration. As the bird lifted, banking toward the drop zone, she spotted the teenager at the fence line below, visiting with his mother, a base pass for closure. He waved, small but deliberate, the gesture carrying across the distance like radio confirmation. Her hand rose in response, brief and formal, the bond affirmed in motion. Debrief in the pavilion wrapped with Harlan's summary, pilot session feedback positive, expansions rolling out base-wide. "Vasquez, you're the anchor. Mentorship slot open if you want it." She accepted with a nod, the role fitting like a well-worn glove, loyalty extending from Rex to the ranks, from orders to the quiet reforms mending them. As the group dispersed, sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the fields, Elena clipped Rex's lead for the return. The dog's tail gave a single sweep, his warmth a constant amid the evolving order, the cost of integrity paid in scrutiny, redeemed in the subtle shifts, a private redirected, a boy steadied, a unit fortified. In the gathering dusk, with the chapel bells tolling faintly, she sensed the legacy taking root, one disciplined breath at a time. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Sergeant Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. Weeks turned into months at Fort Bragg, the relentless cycle of drills and deployments etching deeper grooves into the red clay paths that wound through the base like veins of duty. The K-9 unit's kennels expanded subtly under the new protocols, additional runs added for cross-training rotations, the air now laced with the mingled scents of pine shavings and the faint, oiled sharpness of support gear stored nearby. Elena Vasquez moved through her days with the same quiet efficiency, her boots leaving measured prints in the dew-kissed grass at dawn. Rex ever at her heel, his black and tan form a constant shadow in the humid Carolina light. The assembly's echoes had faded from casual chatter, but their imprint lingered in the chain of command. Mandatory briefs on asset integration now standard in weekly musters, logistics personnel rotating through handler shadows, learning the subtle language of loyalty that bound man to dog. Harlan's mentorship slot had formalized into a quarterly program, Elena at its core, guiding sessions in the ops tent where folding maps unrolled across scarred tables and the hum of tactical radios provided a steady underscore. Observe the partnership. She'd instruct the mixed groups, privates wide-eyed beside seasoned infantry, deploying Rex on scent lines that snaked through the mock village setups, his nose cutting through distractions like a blade through fog. One afternoon, under a sky heavy with the promise of rain, a young logistics specialist from Dawson's old squad approached her during a break, water bottle in hand, his uniform still creased from basic. "Sergeant, heard about Private Dawson. He's top in his retrain class at SIL. Credits the push for straightening him." Elena nodded, clipping Rex's lead as thunder rumbled distant, the dog's ears flicking toward the horizon. "The chain corrects, Corporal. It's what keeps us whole." The reforms rippled outward. Command memos circulating to sister units at other installations, enhanced family outreach protocols, modeled on her letters to Ramirez's son, now a structured option for handlers to maintain ties with dependents of the fallen. Elena reviewed the guidelines in the handler's lounge one evening, the room's fluorescent hum mingling with the soft snores of off-duty dogs curled in corners, their flanks rising and falling in synchronized rest. Rex lay at her feet, head on her boot, his warmth a tactile reminder of the bonds that procedure now sought to safeguard. She'd penned another note that week to the teenager. Updates on unit runs, a mention of how his father's techniques still shaped their patrols, dispatching it through official channels. The envelope sealed with the quiet finality of a salute. The boy's response arrived mid-autumn, a simple card slipped into her inbox by base mail, block letters on lined paper, recounting his first semester at community college, a part-time job at a local kennel. "Dad would be proud of the changes," he wrote. "You showed me Guardians aren't just on the field, they're the ones who stay." Elena folded it into her locker, beside Ramirez's old training manual, its pages dog-eared from years of reference. The moral tension that had gripped her through the Dawson incident now resolved into a steadier cadence. Duty and compassion intertwined, not opposed, each enforcing the other in the rigid lattice of service. Winter brought joint exercises with EOD teams. The air crisp with frost that crunched under tires as convoys rolled out to the range at 0500, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn dark. Elena and Rex took lead on a high-stakes sim, detecting layered threats in a simulated convoy ambush, the dog's alerts sharp against the crackle of blank rounds and the metallic tang of pyrotechnics. Harlan observed from the command post, radio in hand, his voice threading confirmations over the net. Vasquez team solid on primary, secondary clear. As the exercise wrapped, handlers debriefing under heated tents with steam rising from thermoses of coffee, a liaison from Division HQ pulled her aside. "Your program's metrics are up, cohesion scores improved 15%, commands eyeing expansion to airborne units, lead instructor role, if you're in." She accepted without hesitation, the weight of the offer settling like a well-fitted harness, integrity's legacy, transforming a single stand into institutional sinew. Rex sensed the shift, pressing close during the drive back, his muzzle resting on the seat's edge, eyes on the passing pines blurred by the window. The base gates loomed, floodlights casting long beams across the entry point, where sentries saluted the returning convoy. Inside the wire, routine reclaimed them. Kennel checks, gear maintenance, the soft click of leashes in the dim-lit halls. One Sunday, as spring edged in with warmer winds carrying the bloom of dogwoods, Elena attended chapel alone, Rex waiting outside as always, his form silhouetted against the stone steps. The pews held fewer shadows now, the service a blend of prayer and reflection on service bonds. She sat at the back, uniform crisp, hands folded in her lap, the chaplain's words on quiet courage washing over her like radio static fading to clarity. No disruptions this time, just the steady toll of bells at close, echoing across the grounds. As she emerged into sunlight, the teenager waited by the path, taller now, his civilian jacket zipped against the breeze. He'd driven up for the weekend, base pass in hand, eyes bright with the confidence of youth tempered by loss. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, extending a hand, the grip firm like his father's had been. "Got accepted to ROTC. Wanted you to know. It's because of the Guardians like you and Rex." She held his gaze, words measured. "Your path honors him, son. Carry the bond forward." He nodded, glancing at Rex, who sat alert, tail sweeping once in greeting. They parted with a salute, informal but profound, the teenager heading to his car, Elena turning toward the handler's quarters with Rex at heel. The bass thrummed around them, distant rotor wash from a medevac drill, the sharp report of a firing line, the enduring hum of loyalty that wove through it all. Her actions had sparked not just reform, but redemption. Dawson's redirection, the boys' anchor, the unit's fortified line. A symbol of moral strength etched into the ranks. In the quiet breath between steps, discipline and conscience converged. Legacy forged in the silence of service. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of She Sat Alone at the Back of the Church, until a teenager called her my guardian. See you in the next one.